Greetings, my name is Cam Miller and I am an independent filmmaker, freelance filmmaker for Cam Miller Films, my company. And I'm also the director and producer of Star Wars The Liberation Protocol, a Star Wars fan film written by the esteemed Jonathan Chesser, who just did an outstanding job of coming up with a story. He did a behind-the-scenes video on the writing process and answered some questions that were presented to him and tackled some subjects on that. I thought I would do the same thing, but kind of come at it at a different angle in regards to kind of the technical things and some of the decisions that we made to make the film. Just quickly, of course I'm a Star Wars fan, but that term gets thrown around, fanboy, gets used a lot, but I kind of come at it at a different angle. I would rather watch a Star Wars documentary over and over and over again than anything else. That's what made me do what I do. It's the reason I got into this as my profession. It was a long road to get here, mind you, but I was a child of the late 70s and 80s, and when the original trilogy was in its heyday, of course everybody my age, it captured their imagination, and it was no different for me. So I was able to use that love, that passion for the effects, the music, the storytelling, and to do that for a living now is just, it's an awesome thing. But that was the building block. Star Wars is what made me realize that this was something that I could do. So when this film was, this idea was thrown out there for the Star Wars fan film, I'd always wanted to do one since I was, I guess, 9, 10 years old. And we had this epic, Jonathan and I had this epic plan for something much bigger, and we will actually have other tales to tell throughout the Star Wars universe, and Jonathan is actually working right now on some projects that we'll talk about at a later date, I hope. But this was kind of like dipping our toe into the Star Wars universe, and his writing was just fantastic, but we didn't have a lot of time, number one, to work with. Number two, the parameters set before us were extremely limiting, so we had to, figure out what we were going to do in that scope, and it was a challenge. It really was, and I know it was for Jonathan, and it really was for me as well. So we had no time, there was no budget, and it was just, how can we tell this story in 5 minutes, although the story is probably 4 to 6 hours. How do we break it down? So we decided to make the Liberation Protocol. A lot of 11th hour changes, a lot of decisions that were made based upon the parameters set before us, like I said. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun to do. One of the aspects, technically, was the decision to have a droid. And you don't see droids in fan films very often, if at all. And if you do, you're going to see your R2-D2s or other droids that are in the films. But we decided to create an entire character. He became a character. Of course, I'm speaking of Crasher, the droid that I built in a few weeks. It was really not a lot of time. It was like, here's an idea. Jonathan and I came up with it. Let's have a droid as one of the main characters. Since we have 5 minutes to work with, let's use him to the best of our ability to kind of carry his part of the story along. And it's a lot easier to do that than to try to cram a bunch of actors and create dialogues and emotions that you're really not going to get in 5 minutes. How can we do that? Well, let's make a droid. Let's call him Crasher, and it was a lot of fun to make. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. It was so cool to be able to put him together. Now, behind the scenes wise, it was really, what do I have in my workshop here at my house in the basement? What can I do to make this? So it was, I have an old flower pot that looks like a head. Let me use that. Here's some old camera equipment and things. Being a filmmaker, I have tons of old equipment and parts and and bits and pieces laying around, and I save everything, much to the chagrin of my family, I'm sure. But I started piecing things together and started to think about how could I do this, and there was a lot of super glue involved, a lot of drilling, a lot of makeshift welding and patching things on here and there, but once it was done, it was so awesome to see. Now it's not a full functioning droid per se. It is, Crasher is more of a, think of it as a puppet, a droid puppet. We were able to manipulate him using green screen rods to move his head around and to roll him around where he needed to go, and his robotic hand would come out. That was all. It's all puppetry, because there was no way we were going to have the time to electronically make him come to life in that aspect. So he's basically a puppet, and it was a real challenge, but it was so much fun. I mean, adding the lights, making little holes so we could stick flashlights in places. It was probably the coolest thing I've ever made for a film. I've had to make props and things like that for other things I've done, but this was just something completely on its own. It was so awesome to do. I loved it. And he turned out great. I mean, but I had an old flower pot, I had the camera pieces, I had bits and pieces of old televisions, things like that. And it was just like, how can I make this look like a droid that was just put together, home built? And basically, I was trying to make it look like he was thrown together in a workshop and built to serve a purpose. So that was really, really cool to do. And for the effects, we made a decision early on that we were going to tackle this as an original trilogy type of film, as practical as possible. Now, that hindered us a lot because of the fact that it would have been a lot easier to just CG things and kind of almost make everything 3D and computer generated. We could have just done that in a few weeks and thrown something out there. But I was really, really adamant about, let's make this as practical and real as possible. And I am a huge proponent of the less green screen the better. I really am. I'm not a fan of green screen at all. I would rather not use it at all. But there are times when you have no choice. But there was a lot of problems that came up with that, going that route, of course. The weather didn't cooperate. We were doing this in the winter, so there was no outside shots that were going to be able to be done. And when we did finally have a shooting day where our schedules lined up, it was minus 10 degrees outside. So it was like, well, any kind of outside shots that I did want to kind of capture, we couldn't do. So it was, let's clear out the biggest room in my house and set up things practically around to kind of do close shots as much as possible, and just kind of go with it. There was no rehearsals. There was nothing, no setups that would, take a long time to do. It was basically, here's what, on the fly, it really was. Here's what you want to say here and here and here. Let's follow the script, because the script was awesome, but there was a lot that got cut out because of our time constraints. And it's really a shame that we couldn't do that, but we had no choice. We had 5 minutes. That was the rule. That was the parameters. This is what you have to do. So things went quick, and having the droid, Crasher, made it a little bit easier. And it was something, and it worked out with something cool. You just don't, like I said, you don't see that very often. So, in a nutshell, that's how it was done. That's how we decided technically to put things together for the film. And it's, like I said, it was a blast to do. Looking forward to more future projects where Jonathan and I are going to do some things and maybe involve some more people and try to do some more fan film type of projects, but not necessarily film. So keep that in mind. There'll be some other things, old school, that we'll bring back and do. And it's when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we're not trying to make millions of dollars and I guess steal anybody's thunder, so to speak, or or I know that there's a lot of things that were wrong with the film, but it wasn't about that. It was about, this is a good story that Jonathan wrote. Let's put this together and make it as awesome as possible. And I think we pulled it off. It's not nearly like I originally had in my head. The original plan that I had for the script was completely different. But what are you going to do? You go with it. You have fun. There's two ways to go about it. You say, it's not what I want. Forget it. I'm not doing it all. Or you say, this is what I have in front of me. Let's make it work at the best of possible. However it turns out, hey, that's how it turns out. It's a learning experience. So that's what it was. Liberation Protocol, a fun project. Looking forward to doing some more Star Wars universe projects with Jonathan. It's going to be a lot of fun. And thanks for watching. May the Force be with you. Catch you later.